fishing has heard of a fly called the woolly bugger. So, what is a woolly bugger? Well, the great thing about it, it's a streamer pattern mainly, that it imitates nothing for the most part, but looks like everything. And it's just able to be changed and varied in numerous ways, depending on the situation. The fly was originally designed in Pennsylvania, probably about, I'm going to guess 40 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, maybe by a fellow by the name of Russell Blessing. And it was originally designed as imitation for the Dobson fly larva or Hellgrammite, for smallmouth bass mainly. So the original one was tied with a black tail, varying shades of olive and gray in the body, and then black hackle on it. And since then, it's morphed into numerous forms and a rainbow of colors, and they all work really under any given situation. It can be imitative of anything from bait fish to a crayfish, leeches, again, Dobson flies, or it can be just a straight attractor pattern. So again, we're looking at the original pattern here, but there's a few maybe weak spots to the original pattern, or at least the way it's generally tied today. And I want to kind of address those initially, and then we're going to look at some variations of the fly. So really the first thing you run into in a lot of cases is after you catch a couple fish on one, or you go to get your forceps in and unhook the fish, you often end up with something that looks kind of like that. So the tail gets shredded and the hackle unwraps. So, what can we do to minimize that happening? So let's take a look at that to start off with. And the hook I usually use anymore is some sort of a straight eye streamer hook. A lot of times you'll see the down eye style hooks, but I don't know. I think the fly just swims a little bit better. Straight eye, you don't really need a down eye on that. This is a 2460 or 2461 Daiichi. It's an Aberdeen bend, super sharp, nice wide gap. I've kind of gone to wanting flies that have a wide, or a hook with a wide gap on it. I think it just, gets a hold of the fish better. And let's just start the thread first off. We're not going to weight this one or anything. We're just going to address a couple of those weaknesses we discussed. So the fly is generally tied with a marabou tail. And a lot of us, I know, are familiar with marabou. Marabou these days is down from turkeys. That does not come from the marabou stork anymore. And we get it on, generally in a package like this. And we want to sort through these and pick out the good ones. And really with the marabou, what we're looking for is something with a nice flexible tip to it. Let me pull a feather off here. Okay. Nice flexible tip. And generally what we're using is just the tip section of the feather. Okay. And really the first thing you want to do is don't try and shred anything off the edges. Use the tip section. You can discard everything on the bottom. Tie it in. Okay. We can also find marabou barred. Okay, different colors on it with a black barring in it. Some of it is grizzly, natural grizzly. Pretty hard to find in any quantity of sizes and colors. But like Montana fly actually puts barring on feathers. So they've really, added a lot to the variety of things that are available to tie this fly. And we'll look at some other stuff from Montana fly too, but you can get their marabou in a couple different sizes and pre-barred in different colors, black and brown barring with, the main body, all different colors. But that being said, I'm going to show you something else that we can use for a tail. Okay, this kind of comes out of the steelhead realm, what we're doing with intruder patterns and stuff like that. This is Arctic fox, okay? And the Arctic fox comes off the tail almost sliced like bread. They call it medallions, okay? Hopefully we can kind of see what that is. But it comes off in a round piece like this. The great thing about this material is that it's super, super flexible, okay? Moves like marabou in the water, but it's virtually indestructible, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull a section, and again, this varies depending on the size of the fly. That's maybe 1/8 of an inch or so in diameter. And I'm gonna cut that off down right on the hide of that medallion. And I've got a nice tuft of this Arctic fox here. You can see we've got some longer guard hairs in there. Whoop, let me get back where we're focused a little better. Yep. Yeah. Guard hairs and then some underfur. I'm gonna thin out the underfur a touch.
Jerry, is this something you'd want to stack?
At this point, not really.
Okay.
I mean, you could do multiple colors and stuff if you wanted, but this is, we'll keep it simple at this one here just to show the material. So I've got that thinned down to what I think is kind of in line with what the, the hook is. And normally we'll tie this stuff in, if you want to gauge it, approximately the length of the hook shank or so. So I've got that measured. Going to switch that over, secure it down tightly. Okay. Another thing, in a lot of my tying, I've started to use thinner threads now. The UTC 70 denier or like the Vivus 6/0 and 8/0 threads, they're super strong, but they don't bulk up. And that's why I really like them. So they really help hold things together good. So we've got our tail in there. And the next step would be really, the components would be a body and a hackle on this fly. So I'm going to select a saddle hackle first. And again, the hackle on these is normally some sort of a saddle hackle. And the saddle, if you're not familiar with it, is actually off the back of a rooster. So you can get full saddle patches like this, okay? And kind of the grizzlies are often the favored color these days on this pattern rather than the solid colors. But, if you don't want to invest in a whole saddle patch, there's a number of different companies now that are offering these woolly bugger packages with dyed and natural colored grizzly in smaller quantities than that. So, you can get an assortment of colors of these, fairly inexpensively, and you can cover, several different sizes with something like this. But I picked out a barred olive hackle here. So normally when we tie this fly, it's tied in by the tip. Okay, the hackle's tied in by the tip. And when we wrap forward, that'll actually make those fibers kind of cup or orient to the backwards a little bit. So I'm going to do that. But one thing I forgot to add in there, and I apologize for that, is often we'll see a little bit of flash or something in this fly these days, crystal flash or some more other flash material. So let's throw a little bit of that in there and make sure you're doing that the right way. And what we're going to do is cut a piece longer than what we need. This is a couple inches long here. I'm going to tie it in approximately the length of the tail so it kind of blends in there. Secure it down and then pull it back like that. So that's now locked in there. It will never pull out. If you just tie it in straight without pulling it back, this stuff's really slippery and it can't slide out. Okay, so let's get our hackle tied in, and I'm going to separate out some of the fibers from the tip, create a little notch in there. And we're gonna tie that in at that point. Let everything kind of extend out to the rear. And then a simple way to really strengthen this whole thing up when we start wrapping it, just add a rib to it. Doesn't have to be much. I'm going to use some copper brassy wire here. But you could use, like tippet material, clear mono, something thin like that. It's just to help strengthen everything and keep that hackle from getting broken in unwrapping. Okay, so I'm going to secure that in. And again, we're keeping everything at the rear of the hook. Got a few flyers here. We're not too worried about those, but I'll get those out of there. Okay, let's add a body on here. And, when we look at the body materials, we're normally using, or the original material was a chenille, a rayon or cotton chenille, which is kind of like a pipe cleaner with a flexible stem to it. Okay, and we can get this in any one of, a million different colors. There are some really cool, multicolored versions of this. That's called variegated. Okay, and these give a different look to everything. And there's even, the same material that has kind of a flashy, material mixed in with it. So, there's all kinds of new options on the body materials for this. Even like some of the, the full synthetic materials that really have a lot of flash and sparkle to them. Estaz, again, also comes in multiple colors and UV versions and everything. So really the body combinations that we can do on this pattern anymore are pretty much endless. But let's throw for the heck of it, chartreuse body on this one. And this is just regular chenille. And really when I tie it in to keep bulk to a minimum, I'm going to pull some material off the center core. Okay, just so there's a little tab down there. Get that locked in. Everything's right at the back of the hook. Advance our thread forward up to the eye, and we'll start wrapping our body here. Now, you can get different diameters material, this chenille. I generally just use medium, because if you want to make a really bulky body, you can tie it in up front first, wrap back and wrap forward. Okay, or you can make just a couple turns, and then if you need to, just come back over it a little bit to beef it up a little bit. But just kind of get it wrapped up there nice and smooth.
Jerry, so for thickness, is it really just personal preference? Should you be seeking out a really narrow body? Is there an advantage to a fat body versus a narrow body, depending on the fish you're fishing for?
Pretty much all of the above. Again, as this really is not a precise imitation of anything, we can vary it all over the place. Now, if I was doing maybe a thin bait fish, that's kind of what I'm trying to imitate, or a leech, maybe a thinner body is better. A crayfish, maybe you'd want a heavier body. So we can create that illusion of the bulk there by both the chenille, and we'll also see it down the road here by the hackle itself too. So there's multiple ways to adjust that. So I'm going to start wrapping the body here, or I'm sorry, the hackle here, and kind of like a wet fly, soft hackle, kind of try and tease these fibers to the back a little bit as you're wrapping. And these longer feathers, you don't necessarily even need to use hackle pliers in a lot of the cases. because I'm not sure where I put mine anyhow right now. Okay, and just for the sake of neatness and making the fly look good, we'll try and space the wraps out fairly evenly up to the eye. And I don't mind getting some of that real fuzzy marabou kind of stuff up in front in there either. Okay, so I'm gonna tie that off, lock it in a few times, and clip this hackle off. One thing when you're clipping, try and move the bobbin out of the way. I'm using my couple fingers here to push it out of the way. Make a nice clean cut there. We'll kind of get any loose stuff wrapped down a little bit. Okay, and you can see, those fibers are oriented to the rear a little bit, just the way we wanted. And now we're going to start working this rib through, and I'm just going to kind of move it back and forth to get it through the fibers. And you can put it through the same wraps. You can kind of reverse wrap it at a little different angle. It doesn't really matter. We're just, again, this is to add security into the hackle fibers. So you're kind of mirroring the number of wraps that you had. Then we'll tie that off. Okay. Trim that. Make a nice little head. And again, you can see with this thinner thread, I mean, it's so much easier to work around the hook eyes, unless you're doing something like flaring or spinning deer hair where you need that extra strength. Most of the time, there's no need to, here's my hackle pliers. There's no need to go with a bulkier thread if you don't have to. At least I don't think so. We'll do a couple 4 or 5 turn whip finishes. Okay. And really that's secure. That's never going to come apart. I mean, you could put UV on it. You could put, cement on it to seal it. And now we've got, again, basic woolly bugger, little different tail design. And even if we want to put a little barring in there, this Arctic Fox will with a Sharpie pen. We can hit that easily. Take that all the way down to the end. And we can get that a little bit more in there. So we can even put a little barring into the tail like that too. Okay, so this makes this a much more durable fly. That way, just tying in the rib and a little substitute material for the tail. Okay, so that's Arctic Fox. So let's look at a little different way of accomplishing the same thing. Start with the same hook. Again, this is I think that's a size 2 there in this particular hook. Again, just partially for the visibility of it, but it certainly isn't too big a fly for, a lot of trout applications, certainly not for smallmouth and that type of stuff. So, 4s and 2s often, especially in real life fishing situations, maybe down to 6s at times. That's kind of the normal sizes for this pattern. So let's kind of do the same thing again. Only we're going to add a little bit more into the mix this time. Show you a couple different things. Something else we can use for tailing material is, can we see that here? Extra select craft fur. Okay, This stuff is awesome. Again, you can get it in a rainbow of colors. It's, again, super, super durable, totally indestructible, swims just really, really well in the water. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm going to trim a section of this, and always trim any of this stuff right down at the base of the material or the patch, so you can really see as you work your way back. And this is going to have some longer hairs in it. I'm going to pull those out. And again, we have some of that under fur in there. We're going to thin that down. And I'm just going to you got to do a few of these to kind of get an idea on how much you actually need, just proportionate. That's a touch, I think a touch too big, so I'm going to thin it out. Okay, thin it down a bit. Okay, I'm going to judge that approximately length of the hook shank. Get that in there, secure it. We can add, again, a little bit of flash in there. And a lot of times, what's normally used is just regular old crystal flash. But, you can use any flash material depending on what you're trying to do. Or if you have a favorite, because they all do give a little different look. Just kind of evening those up a little bit. So that'll be, again, tied in to kind of blend in with the length of the tail. We have some sticking forward. We're going to pull that back, secure that in. Okay. And we have a nice, very flexible, movable tail in there. Let's take a look at a little different way to secure this the hackle and stuff, so it becomes damaged less, and the fly will hold up longer for us. So I took some of that flashy, this is like a dark brown and gold chenille here, and again cleared a little bit of material off down at the front for a thread tab there. I'm going to catch that right in front of the tail, lock that down. Oh, I got one crystal flash for fiber sitting back there. All right. Take the thread up just a touch there. But this time I'm going to make one full wrap. Okay. Then just give a wrap of thread over that to secure it. And I'm going to use a different hackle this time. There's a material that's called schlappen, which I had a bunch of it here. Here it is. And again, it's stuff that back in the day when I started tying, we used to kind of discard a lot of this stuff because we thought it really wasn't good for anything. It's all webby and loose and stuff. But again, now we know that this is prime stuff for really a lot of different things. You can make full feather tails on big streamers. You can wrap it, again, it's really a major material in the steelhead realm, but it transfers well over into general trout fishing and a lot of warm water stuff. Grizzly in this stuff is really hard to get in any quantity. And usually if you do, it's priced more than solid colors, just because, again, there isn't that much of it. Luckily or thankfully, our friends at Montana Fly are also doing the same dye job on schlappen too. So they do this on marabou, they do it on regular saddle, schlappen, and some other stuff where they take just solid colors and they've got a way that they imprint the barring on it. So again, it makes it a lot more, a lot lower priced than that, and we're getting a full range of colors in these barred feathers. So I've got a nice brown schlappen feather here that I'm going to tie in right again in front of where the body material's tied in. So I'm gonna, again, just trim that down a little bit. Create a little, let me get all the feathers off of there, all the fibers. Get that unwrapped off of there. Tie that in. Get everything locked in and secured well. Advance our thread forward. So again, we're going to kind of give a couple wraps, 2 forward and 1 kind of back over. Going to keep this fairly skinny again, because the schlappen is going to really flare out wide and really add, the illusion of bulk. I lost my hacker players again.
Right there.
There they are. Stuff keeps running away on me. Does anybody else have that problem?
Always, Jerry.
Okay, so another wrap or 2.
Jerry, while you're doing that, we do have a question in the chat. Ken is asking, where does the schlappen come from? I'm presuming that means like on the bird.
Yeah, it's part of the saddle back towards the tail. Is where the real webby feathers are found. In fact, if we look, depending on how they cut the saddle and how far back they take it, you'll start to see some of that material or feathers very similar to that coming off of the back end of the saddle. So here's the bottom, the rear part of the bird on the back is what we're looking at here. And then the upper part of the back are these either shorter or feathers with a lot more individual fiber, less webbing and stuff in it. Okay, so the schlappen comes off the back end of the bird. Okay, so we're going to wrap this one forward now, and this time we didn't use a rib. Now you could use a rib, but what happens is where you usually break this is at the junction from the tail to the body. That's where that stem is really exposed. And you could certainly add a rib onto this. I want to space that out a little bit better. There we go. But you don't necessarily have to if you don't want to. So this will be nearly as durable with just 1 less step in it. One thing about the schlappen, you got to kind of tease everything out as you're wrapping it. Just to make sure you're not trapping any fibers underneath. And make sure you get plenty up at the head. And I'm going to, again, pull some of these fibers out as I tie that down too. Trim that down. And we'll get a bit of a head formed here. And we could make that much neater if we want. And we can tie that one off at that point if we want, but let's kind of bring a couple other things in the mix. We talk about weighting this fly a lot. I haven't weighted these, and really you can fish them both ways, again, depending on the situation. So if you're going to put lead wire on it, I would use wire approximately the same diameter of the hook shank. Hopefully we can see that here. And I've wrapped the front half of the hook. You always want to stay with the weight on the forward half of the fly. Okay, you don't want the weight at the back end because it would just totally kill the swimming motion of the fly. So this will kind of like glide through the water when it's weighted this way. And it'll sink a little bit faster than it would normally. But we can also make this a little bit different by adding lead eyes, okay, barbell eyes. Okay, if we tie the barbell eyes so that the hook rides up, okay, this fly will have more of a jigging up and down movement to it. Okay, if we tie the eyes underneath the hook eye, okay, this will have more of a gliding, a slow moving dive to it. It won't be as erratic or sharp a dive to it as the hook is on top. So this is a very easy way we can, again, alter the movement of a fly like this with just by doing this. Okay, and let's throw a set of eyes on here. So in order to do that, I'm going to take the thread back a little bit farther. We could finish this off at that point, but let's just add a little bit more into the program here. So I'm going to take a set of barbell eyes, and again, you can get these painted in any multitude of colors these days, from a solid, red, chartreuse, pretty much anything you want, orange, pink, yellow. So I'm going to take a set of red ones, and I'll tie these in on top of the hook. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some super glue gel, put it right on top of the hook where the head's at. So this is the same way you'd put eyes in on a Clouser minnow or something like that. I'm going to lay the eyes on top of the hook shank, start my thread wraps across at an angle, and then go underneath and cross over. And I'm going to do that and let that begin to straighten out. And I want these kind of straight across. Give that a couple more turns here. And then to really kind of lock it in, I'm going to wrap underneath the eyes, but over the hook shank. Okay, and you're starting to get something that looks like that. And with that super glue gel on there, should hold pretty secure. Take up in front, and again, just kind of get a nice base of thread there.
So Jerry, if you were planning to do this with some barbell eyes, would you wait for the end and put it on as the last piece of material, or would you start with the eyes and then build the fly afterwards? Is there benefits to either?
With this pattern, I would wait till the end.
Got it.
Like with a Clouser minnow, you mount the eyes first.
Yeah.
So it depends on the style of fly what you're doing, but you're really it's easier to do it this way.
Yeah.
With this one, and again, we've got a fly very functional and fishable just like that. But if we want to put a little barring in there, again, regular art markers, you just want a permanent marker, Sharpies, anything like that, so we can add a little bit more into the mix like that, give it a little different look. Maybe in our mind, a little more natural look to it. So essentially that fly would be fished this way, and it will have more of a hopping movement to it with the eyes mounted in that manner there. Okay. So, as far as thinking about some of the question.
Yeah, Jerry. So you touched on a subject that, and I've just been tying for a year, but that I'm starting to think about as I'm fishing. Because like sometimes I get a fly in the water and it's fishing too high in the water column, or sometimes it's fishing too low in the water column. Like when you tie, let's say a series of woolly buggers, do you say, okay, I'm going to have an unweighted, and I know it's going to fish in the top part of the water column, and if I had the barbell eyes, it's good for 6 feet down? Or do you, in your mind, do you divide that up? Like where is this fly going to fish? And do you
Sure.
have a process to figure it out?
Well, nothing that's probably, I mean, scientific or anything like that to a certain extent, but yes, I mean, I have him, I will have him in different weights, some unweighted, depending on the type of movement and stuff you want to do. And is that Joe?
That's Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe. So that brings up another point.
Well, before you move on from that, Jerry, I've got a follow up for that.
Okay.
So, and I struggle with this as a new angler myself, a newish angler myself. So you've got a bunch of the same fly tied in the same color pattern, different weights. How do you keep that organized in your fly box? How do you know which is weighted which? Do you have different fly boxes for different weights? Do you just guess as you go?
I mean, I very rarely put lead underneath
Got it.
the body.
Got it.
Okay, on these anymore.
Sure.
So just by looking at the size of the
That's a bigger
eyes,
eye, yeah.
or if you've got a bead or a cone on
Sure,
it, that's
sure.
kind of what determines it. So, since this whole thing on weight has come up, so there's different ways that we can weight these flies. And they'll all move a little bit differently. They'll give a little bit different appearance to them. One is not better than the other. They're just different.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, we can do a bead. Can we see that there? Let me go this way. Okay, we can do a bead on that. Okay, and we can get different sizes, different color beads. Okay. Cones, if you really want more weight on the front. Okay, we can do with cones and that too. Again, we've mentioned the barbell style eyes. Okay, different sizes of those, different colors of those. But here's another way to really do different things. So here's a version of that fly, totally unweighted. The body is pearl Estes. Okay, this one has white craft fur for the tail, a little bit of flash in the tail, white schlappen, and pearl Estes body, which I hit the front of with a red Sharpie. This is a great injured bait fish imitation. This thing at times is deadly fished on an intermediate line. Okay, so that it just kind of hovers a bit below the surface, and it will sit almost stationary in the water. And you put it on with a loop knot and you twitch and jerk and pop, stripping and using the rod tip, and it'll flutter and everything. There's times when smallmouth cannot resist a presentation like that. So what we're doing is we're trying to imitate or duplicate what the guys are doing gear fishing in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So this gives kind of like that suspending jerk bait kind of presentation. So you can also adjust the weight with the line.
Yeah.
Okay, and fishing a fly like this on a sinking headline can also be very effective at times too, because they don't always want a big up and down jiggy motion in that. Okay, sometimes they want that real subtle movement and stuff too. So, and the only way you find that out is by fishing on any given day. But there's ways that we can duplicate a lot of stuff that the gear guys are doing at this point in time. Okay, so I want to show another thing too is, if we want to put a flashback on one of these, and let's see, let me pull one out here. Okay, so this has got flash all the way down the back. I think you can see that. Okay, as well as in the tail. So how do we do that? So let's take a look at that whole process. So I have a fly that I kind of, just for the sake of time, kind of prepped earlier, tied in the tail, tied in the body, tied in the hackle, put some wire in for a rib. And let's see how we would do like a flashback version of that. So let me just start my thread again. And, a lot of this is pretty basic, and I apologize if, this is redundancy to a lot of you, but I know that, again, we've got some newer tires in there. So, this is to help everybody along. So here's, again, just a little more of a flashy material. This is called crinkle mirror flash. So it's got a lot more sparkle to it than regular crystal flash. So I'm going to cut out a section of that, 8 or 10 fibers. And again, the amount of flash you use can depend on the size of the fly, what you feel like on any given day. I mean, there's no real way to say this is the amount that you use. So I am going to just tie this in and hopefully get it to more or less lay on top of the hook shank. And with these flash materials, the best way to get them tied in is to go with a really low tension wrap, try and get over top of it and then pull down. If you do full tension immediately, this real stiff stuff is going to roll on you. Okay, so we kind of got that tied more or less on the top. And I'm going to wrap all the way back up to the bead here now. Look at that. I can even do it left-handed, not very well. Okay, so we got that bead kind of secured up to the front. One more left-handed. There we go. And let's wrap body first, like we have several times now. Yes, I know this is a rotary vise, and I'm not tying rotary. I did not learn to tie on a rotary vise, and I've just never really gone that route, but I like it because it allows me to easily inspect all angles of the fly. Okay, so that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But sometimes you cannot teach an old dog new tricks. So at that point, I'm going to pull this flash back, get my feather ready to wrap here, clear out all that marabou. One thing about marabou, if it's going all over the place, just wet your fingers a little bit and you can generally tame it down pretty good then. All right. I'm going to hold that flash back. Get that started. Reposition if I have to. Nice thing, I can move this around a little bit if need be. And again, just for the sake of neatness, we usually try and keep these wraps fairly uniform. I mean, it doesn't, I don't think the fish care if it's a little sloppy looking. In fact, if it gets chewed up a little bit, sometimes that fly looks a little better. All right, so let's see where that flash is in relation to the length of the tail, a little long. And they don't have to be all the same. length either. Let's get that wire out of there. Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of trim that flash a little, varying lengths in that, so that'll give a little extra movement and everything. And let's start wrapping our wire up through there. And I mean, you can use different types of wire, different colors, and you know, it'll change, subtly change what the fly looks like a little bit. I don't think it makes, you know, a huge difference. And the one thing as you're wrapping this wire, just keep wiggling it back and forth so that it kind of works through the hackle fibers. Trim everything down. Again, we can wrap that back a little bit. Okay, so again, a little thinner fibers there. We get a little different look with this one. Okay.
We got a question in the chat, Jerry, while we're here. Devin's asking, you know, how much tension should you be putting into the wire as you wrap it over here?
It doesn't have to be super. You want it tight, but not jammed down in there. Okay. I guess, you know, you're not as hard as you can go, you know, just tight, taut that you can feel it. But again, it doesn't have to be super hard and stiff in there. Okay.
And, you know, clearly you're doing that wire wrap in the same direction as everything else, but is there an advantage to kind of counter wrapping it here, or, you know?
I really don't think so. You could counter wrap it,
Yeah.
you know, as you do on certain materials.
Yeah.
But I don't, you know, as long as you're getting it over that hackle stem, I don't think it really makes a difference.
Yeah, and I personally find that counter wrapping wire can be difficult to tie off at the end. So.
Yeah. So, you know, this is just, we're trying to keep things simple, but, you know, make this fly as durable as we possibly can. So that's kind of the flashback one. Now you could put a lot more flash in for a real flashy back and then trim it out in the tail. So there's all kinds of different ways you can tweak and adjust this stuff. And there's no right or wrong way. It's, you know, the fish are the ultimate judges, you know, on what we do. So that's kind of throwing the flashback thing in there and adding, you know, we got the bead into the mix.
We do have another question coming through too, which is, you know, what kind of hooks are you using here?
All right. So that hook that I've been using there is a 4X long Aberdeen bend, which is a really just a true round bend hook. This actual hook is a Daiichi 2461. They also do a 2460, which is bronze. But this hook has a super sharp point on it, a short barb, and a wide gap on it. It hooks and holds extremely well. And that's why I like it. I like the straight eye for most applications on this pattern anymore. We don't need a down eye hook. You know, for the most part, it doesn't really accomplish anything extra for us. But any standard streamer hook can be used. Okay, so that's not to say this is the only one. This is just one I think I favor a lot because it's a really good hook. In fact, we're going to look at a couple other hooks here in just a second that we can utilize for this too.
So I was going to say too on that subject, right? You mentioned it. You're tying on a black hook, a black enameled hook. Is there a preference for black over bronze or anything? Or?
No, that's just really what I had.
Yeah.
In this particular style hook.
Yeah.
Okay, black or bronze doesn't really matter. Okay, so let's see. I'm just trying to see what all covered. We did a flash bug. We looked at putting the barbell eyes on. And again, the barbell eyes will really change noticeably the way the fly swims. You know, and if you want the most motion in the fly, you know, you would do it with the barbell eyes on the bottom, or so that the hook is riding upright. Where am I at here? Oh, there we are. Okay. The screen's a little funny looking at everything because it's backwards from the way we're doing it. Okay, so here's maybe that's a little more visible with the orange on there.
Come in from your right. Yeah.
Okay. Like that. Okay. Or we can mount them on the bottom. And it'll definitely sink faster, but it'll be more of a level like sink to it because you've got the weight of the hook underneath there too. So it kind of balances the weight of the eyes out a little bit.
We had a couple of great questions, questions and comments coming in through the chat too. So with the down eye, with the eyes on the top of the hook shank, so that it swims with the bend up. Someone's saying, is that a good technique for less snags?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the thoughts behind doing it that way. But again, you can work it along the bottom more efficiently that way for sure. Yes. And again, you get that different swimming motion. Now, what can we do to even enhance or make something like that even a little bit differently? So, I mean, here we start getting into really almost like really gear type flies. So here's a 60-degree jig hook, barbell eyes, regular woolly bugger, but adding rubber hackle onto it or rubber legs onto it. Okay, so that gives us a whole different look on this too. And this will even stay down longer and farther as you swim back to you, and often maybe more preferable if you're fishing out of a boat or something like that, depending on the structure and stuff you're on, or off a pier or a break wall or something like that. Which one thing that we've I don't know if Matt Redmond's on there tonight, but Matt has been doing a lot of fishing the shoreline area here off the piers, East 55th in that area. And, during the warmer weather, catches a lot of sheephead.
Oh, wow.
Which are just an awesome fish on a fly.
Yeah.
Don't laugh if you haven't caught one.
He says he's here.
Okay, way to go, Matt. So he's kind of a great experimenter and willing to do things, and has some really cool stuff that he's got going on. So, okay, so let's.
Sorry, we do have another question that might be good for the transition here, right? So we've got another question about hooks. So someone says, at what point does the hook shank become too long and potentially give the fish too much leverage, where you would maybe want to go to even a stingers type hook? Yeah.
So great question. It becomes too long when you start losing fish. Okay. And I'm not trying to be, be a smart aleck or anything like that. So that's gonna, that'll vary a little bit, probably depending on what you're fishing and the exact hook and stuff. But I really don't tie on anything longer than a 4X shank anymore. And again, this fly is very doable and very adaptable to a shank system. It also makes a great tube fly too. Okay, so in fact, if you want a longer version of this fly, to really upsize it or something, then yes, I would say you should tie it on a shank or a tube at that point.
Got it.
Okay, but in a standard size, I wouldn't go beyond a 4X. So I'm going to wrap things up by doing probably more of I would call a warm water version of this. Something that I would definitely fish for smallmouth, drum, you might catch walleye on it. It's just hard to say. And we're going to use a different hook design. And this is the Gamakatsu B10S Stinger. Okay. Yeah. Again, this is just a great hook for multiple applications. You know, we find it more in the warm water realm, but it really works well for trout too. But it's a little shorter shank if you want that, but with the wide gap. Okay, super sharp, great hook. It's a black nickel finish on it. So, you know, this is going to be kind of looking at that kind of the fly we just looked at was on that whoops, on the 60-degree shank. And I'm going to call this, for want of a better name, just call it the ultimate bugger. Okay, just to be not silly about it, but just to kind of give it a little bit. You know, this is going to have everything in it, just about that you can put on it. So, or call it the kitchen sink or whatever, something like that. So let's come up with, again, so this is, we're kind of doing what's called freestyling here, where we're putting materials together, imitating nothing in particular, but just, you know, getting a fly that's going to look like something and probably will fish really good. So I'm going to do more of an olive color scheme on this one. Way too much material, okay? So we're back onto the Arctic fox. So learning to judge, gauge material, proportion, and all that kind of stuff is all part of the equation. Material, you know, the nice thing about Arctic fox and the craft fur is that there's no waste.
Yeah.
You know, you get a pack of marabou sometimes, you sort through it, you got 100 feathers in there and maybe a dozen of them are really suitable for what you want. So here you don't have any waste. That's the good thing about it. So this has nice, you know, a lot of guard hairs in there. I'm going to pull some of this under fur out, kind of get it to, okay, that looks pretty good to me. And again, this is not, it's all visual. You're not really got anything size-wise or anything to gauge it. So let's tie that in. Is the tail. Oh, let's see, I got rubber hackle here. Olive and orange, hard combination to beat.
Any tips and tricks on dealing with these rubber legs?
Yeah, we'll kind of talk about that here. So normally, again, the same deal here. Don't tie one strand on because it'll pull out too easy. So just wrap it around your thread, doubled over. And you can easily position it where you want it. Do that with a couple of these.
How about once you have them on and they're flopping all around on you? Just deal with it.
Deal with it. You learn to live with it.
I was tying some flies last summer, and I actually used a twist tie from a pack of bread, and actually like lashed it onto the shank of my vise.
Yeah,
it was
whatever.
helpful, you know.
Material clip.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could use like a material clip or something like that, you know, to help manage things. And you can, you know, I'm going to just trim these a little bit shorter.
And are you kind of gauging it off the length of the tail now? Or?
To a certain extent, yeah. Just kind of want it. I don't really need these super long. I want them in there for some extra movement and color. The one thing with when you're using rubber legs, if you find they are getting tangled, you know, back on the hook when you're casting and stuff, just slowly trim them back, you know.
Got it.
Or you can put other things in there to help keep from tangling them, some of the materials that we're going to use. So let's, let's wrap with Estes on this one. So this is an olive UV Estes, which is a kind of a cool looking synthetic. Same deal here. I'm going to pull some of those fibers off, create a tie-in spot. And rather than rib this one, again, I'm just going to do that single wrap of material to protect that hook. I mean, protect the stem of the hackle. And I'm going to grab another schlop in here. Kind of got an olivey colored one here. And again, I'm just going to separate out, kind of create a little bit of a notch down there as a tie-in spot. Trim that down a little bit. And just lay that in there. And oops, sometimes it works better to lay this on top of the hook and catch it and tie it in that way. Just make sure it's in there securely. Okay. Advance that up. No. So this, when you pull this Estes, it might be a little bit flat coming off of the card. So often, if you may just have to spin it a little bit as you're wrapping it. And each time you wrap it, pull the fibers back a little so that you're not tying them down. Because you want all that stuff sticking out and reflecting. And we're going to add a little bit up to the head here. So we want to leave room. We're going to put some barbell eyes on there. If you haven't figured it out, I love barbell eyes. Okay, so we don't want to jam that too much. So again, another reason to use a thin, strong thread. Just makes that process easier. Trim that down. So we got, here we get a little fatter, bulkier body going now. Pull some of these fibers back out of the way that were sticking there. Okay, and now we're going to wrap, kind of teasing these fibers back a little bit. And I'm going to really put these close together here. It's going to look like a real critter of some sort. Matt, we'll be throwing these things off the break wall, man. Or out of the new boat. Okay, so that was schlopping. And it is sloppy looking, but you know, you're really getting a lot of bulk. Looks like bulk, but it's not. And just tons and tons of movement with that stuff in the water. And let's throw another set of legs on each side.
Jerry, while you tie this on, we get another question. Somebody's asking, what's your preferred thread, manufacturer?
Okay.
Brand?
What I use, traditionally what I've used the most has been UTC.
Yeah.
Okay. UTC, the 70 denier is awesome because it's strong. It's not the strongest thread out there, but it's flat.
Yep.
It ties flat. Yep. So it's minimal bulk to it. And you can do just about anything other than spin deer hair with it. Yeah. What I have started using a lot in certain applications is a lot of the new Vivas threads. Their 8/0, even down to 10/0 is super strong. It's a round thread, but it's so thin that, again, you don't get the bulk. The problem with threads is there's no standard on diameters and strength or anything like that. So that's kind of, it gets confusing on that. So, you know, the UTC threads are just consistent in strength and quality, and they've got a nice range of colors on them. You know, there's some newer GSP threads out there, you know, like 50 denier and stuff like that, super thin. And I mean, unbreakable.
Yeah.
But they're also they're a pain to try and cut.
Yeah. I also find the gel spun threads, since they're, for the most part, they're unwaxed, I find that they can be a little bit difficult, you know, kind of keeping materials where you want it to be.
Yeah. So, you know, they each have their, I guess, benefits or, you know, good things about them, bad things about them. But I think that the UTC threads are really good, you know, general purpose, you know, do anything kind of thread. You know, if you had to pick one, you know, to stick with, that would maybe be the one right there. Ooh, we're going to get fancy on this one. So you know, I was going to put barbell eyes on that, but we've seen that already, right? Yep. So let's do something different. And I just happened to look down in my box down here and saw these. And this is the sculpin helmet from Flymen Fishing Company. It's more of like almost like a crayfishy kind of thing. But with this, we're gonna tie the thread off. Get super glue gel. And for this type of stuff with the barbell eyes, you want the gel. Because again, it's just thicker and it doesn't sag or run, and for mountain eyes and heads like this. So this sculpin helmet is slid on after the fact, okay? So I'm just going to get the legs clear out of the way, and this slides right on. Make sure the legs are coming out smoothly on that. And you can then, if you want, just for peace of mind, put a little thread in front of that again, build that up. Make sure that's going to stay on there. We can do a series of whip finishes on there. Okay, that is on there, and we'll just let that dry. Now I'm going to trim these side legs a little bit too. And again, how long am I trimming them? It's just eyeballing it, okay? Because again, I'm not imitating anything. This is maybe a crayfish as much as anything. But just getting color and movement in there. And this is not a fly, this is a lure. Yeah. Yeah. At this point, it's a glorified jig, but it's light enough that we can cast it on a fly rod. And again, this will definitely crawl nicely on the bottom. If we can see, they're probably better off in the vise, right? Does that make everybody follow that? Yeah. Okay, now you could put little eyes on that thing too. It's got little indentations for it. I'm not really going to worry about it, but we got a little UV in there. You know, we got nice creepy crawly materials. We got barred colors. We got a little bit of sparkle and bright color in there. So, you know, this will definitely do the job. That will catch fish for sure. So the whole thing on this tonight was we're starting with a very basic template. Yeah. Okay, and that template happens to be a woolly bugger which in its own is an awesome fly, and we all know that. I think for many people, the first fish they ever caught on a fly was probably on a woolly bug.
Sure.
And that could have been a bass, it could have been a bluegill, a trout, who knows what. So we know everything pretty much eats them. I've caught bonefish on woolly buggers, in saltwater.
Yeah, yeah.
Tied for saltwater use, but
Sure.
no, they hit them too, So it's just a great fly. And if we look at some of the other, we can look at, the stuff that I've shown you here tonight, but, there's all kinds of stuff we can do. Can we do an articulated woolly bugger? Well, of course we can. Here's two woolly buggers joined together, okay? And the whole idea with that is, you're going to get more movement out of it, and you're getting a longer fly and not having to use a super long shank hook, okay? So articulated woolly bugger, but even some of the I'm going to call them the hot streamer patterns, are all essentially modified woolly buggers. Here's a fly called the circus peanut. This has been around for a while, popularized, designed by Russ Madden up in Michigan, who is a great streamer, tire, and fisherman. But again, that's a woolly bugger. Okay. Even if we look at some of the, Kelly Gallup's well-known patterns. Here's his little what he calls his mini peanut. Okay, which is essentially two woolly buggers joined together. Okay, or the boogeyman or the dungeon. Okay, there's a woolly bugger with a deer hair head on it. Okay, an articulated woolly bugger with a deer hair head. Here's another color scheme of that. Well, actually, this one is a woolly bugger with a mallard flank back on it and a wool head. Okay, so just modifications to that same basic template creates an amazing array of different patterns that can all look and function differently depending on the situation. So I hope we covered anything you ever wanted to know about woolly buggers. Appreciate everybody sitting in. Any other questions or anything like that? We all good?
Jerry, I have one quick question.
Sure.
I noticed that you tie and wrap your hackle from back to front. Though when I started tying, the woolly bugger example videos that I saw did it the opposite way. It doesn't matter. I mean, yours looked effective. So
it doesn't matter. No, I think it's easier to get the fibers to orient that back direction by tying the feather in by the tip and wrapping forward. But it can be done either way. I learned to tie it from back to front. So that's the way I've always done it. But if you're more comfortable doing it the way you are, that's fine, Joe. Like I said, a lot of this stuff, there's no right or wrong. If it catches fish and it holds together, that's the main thing.
now I looked good, like especially when you were using the schloppen. It looked like it was a lot easier to do from back to front. But with the other hackle,
yeah, with the schloppen, it's definitely easier to do it from back to front. Yeah, there's that's for sure. But with a standard saddle hackle, it can be done either way. Okay.
I think that's about it.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. I hope you learned something, and I appreciate everybody sitting in and watching. We'll have this probably up on YouTube in the next couple of days, maybe by the end of the week. If not, it'll be first part of next week. If you want to review anything or you want to pass it on to a buddy or something like that. We generally have programs of some sort on the second Wednesday of the month, and we've been doing these tying programs on the third Wednesday of the month. I know some of the stuff we've got coming up tying is David Hartland's from Nova Scotia is going to be doing an authentic New Brunswick or Newfoundland style bomber,
Okay.
Atlantic salmon fly. Jim Lampros, one of our members, is going to be doing some sort of a warm water focus pattern for May. Trying to think, I don't think we have a program finalized yet for March, but everything will be on our Instagram page, CMNH Trout Club. And again, our YouTube channel is CMNH Trout Club TV. I think we've got, I don't know, 10 or so videos up there now.
Yeah.
And we're going to be adding, adding stuff onto there on a regular basis. So, if you're not a member, we'd love to have you join us. Just reach out to me if you need any info on that. Can certainly get you pointed in the right direction. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Stay warm and stay safe. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jerry.
Good night.